While most of you know I'm a huge gaming mystery buff, I'm also super passionate about game design as well. I think this sense of design was triggered by the gaming mysteries I pursued as a child, and this yearning eventually took me beyond the games I was playing. However, during this journey, there was one thing that really fascinated me that I now have a greater understanding of, and that is the things that game developers left behind. When a game is finished, and the door to making changes is locked one final time, after this process, unused game assets and developer testing grounds lay dormant till the end of days, and only those who break into the game may realize what hidden treasures are waiting there. In some ways, finding these things is both exciting and sad to me. Exciting because I love the thrill of the hunt, but sad because of how long this particular thing existed without ever being recognized or noticed. I know that may be a silly viewpoint, but I am a pretty sentimental guy. However, today we are here to celebrate some of these things that were left behind by game developers, and give them the spotlight they may have never had otherwise. Of course, I figured it was only right to bring along Shesez from Boundary Break, as he is someone who has experienced a lot of these things alongside myself. Starting off though, let's cover a few from my wheelhouse that I experienced over the years. For those of you who have watched my first 6 Nintendo 64 Mysteries video, the Hidden Bridge in Bomberman 64 was one I encountered early on in life. I was surprised years later that no one had really covered this topic, but it is interesting to see how many videos include it now that it is out in the open. It kind of feels cool to contribute something that wasn't well known to the internet. Back then, I had no idea how games were made, so I assumed an invisible bridge was intentional, whereas it was simply a choice by the game designers to remove this section from the game. Whatever purpose this cave had no longer was important to the game itself, so the textures were stripped from the bridge and it was severed from the main chunk of land. The fact that there was a shadow and you could walk on it though meant this object was still there. It was just turned invisible since it was now useless. Invisible objects in games were always neat since they were like the ghosts of what was once important. Another one I thought was interesting was beneath Dino Domain's lava in the 4th level, Hot Top Volcano. If you could hit your barrel roll just right, you could glitch beyond the boundaries in certain levels in Diddy Kong Racing. If you did it in this level though, you could actually warp to the main island from the one-player mode of the game. It seems the developer for some reason left a transition layer beneath the map that teleports you there, and it makes me wonder why they need to test this function on this specific level. This makes the game super interesting though, because if you did this on multiplayer, you could take a second player with you to story mode, which of course was only meant to have one player. There is normally a 2-player mode you can access through cheats, but this spits the second player below boundaries, which can lead to skipping levels in the game. This has a lot of interesting side effects, and obviously makes races a lot easier. This wasn't the only game to feature a methodology of traversing game modes, however. In Turok 2: Seeds of Evil, there was a ton of cheats that could be used at any moment during the game. The issue was that they never set boundaries for when they should or should not be allowed. Now, while this wasn't a physical trait of a developer leaving something behind, this was a logical fault that allowed you to use teleportation cheats that were intended for single player on multiplayer. This is probably something they didn't intentionally want possible, as it breaks the game in a ton of ways. But because it was accidentally left accessible, it was easy to exploit. These cheats often make levels not load properly, and make character and level behaviors quite bizarre. I always remember having a lot of fun with this as a child. In Resident Evil 4, there were some pretty nifty things as well. When I was making my Resident Evil 4 merchant video a year or so ago, I encountered a lot of stuff I forgot about when I first played Resident Evil 4 on the GameCube. Back then, I often replayed a ton of games once I bought Action Replay, and Resident Evil 4's collision hack was a ton of fun. However, I quickly noticed developer test spots in almost every map I was in. Oftentimes to your left when you enter a room is a huge pile of weapons, ammo, and money just behind the wall. I believe these were put here so they could test every weapon in the game in every area, to make sure it functioned properly. Normally, you wouldn't have certain weapons early in the game, but if you did a second playthrough, you'd carry your inventory over to the new game. Besides these weapon deposits, there were also copies of all collectible items usually below the boundaries of the stage. I always thought this was pretty neat. One last item I'd like to cover before passing over to Shesez's world is the book in Super Mario Sunshine. In the early 2000s, many people were super confused at why a random book was at the bottom of the sea in Nookie Bay's bottle mission. This book was inaccessible by normal means unless you glitched through the walls, and because it lacked any way to get to it, it drove people nuts. People talked about how this book was probably something that needed to be retrieved during a certain Shine mission that was scrapped from the game. But that thought alone makes me wonder why it wasn't deleted then. In my eyes, if a mission was cancelled and pulled from development, why would a developer leave its asset behind? especially since it would drive people crazy. Either they knew it would spark conversation, or they simply forgot. But I guess I just would have assumed someone would have noticed it while playtesting the game before it was released. Either way, leaving this object behind in the game caused a lot of turmoil on the internet. While I have a ton more instances of things that were left behind in video games, I do want to pass things over to Shesez so he can discuss some of the things he has encountered himself. In his series Boundary Break, discovering these objects is quite common, so I thought he'd be the perfect counterpart to this video.
Thank you, SwankyBox, for having me on the show. This is a great idea for a video, and it's one that I relate to very closely due to the nature of my series. Like, for example, one thing that I found in Luigi's Mansion was a bouncing pair of arm straps at the entrance of the woods. Now, it's been theorized that these are the straps to the Poltergust 3000, and that it has to be in the scene because it's attached to the Luigi model. But it fails to explain two things. One is, why is it so deliberately animated to be bouncing? And the other is that others have told me that the Poltergust straps are actually all part of one model of Luigi. Another one that I can admit I did not find on my own, but doesn't take away how fascinating it is, in the Rainbow Road stage for Mario Kart Double Dash. In most games, when you look up at the sky, it's actually a modeled box that encapsulates your entire environment. These are called skyboxes, and when you take the camera outside the skybox in Rainbow Road, there is a smiling heart that the developers decided to take out. Now, what's funny is that certain objects on Rainbow Road are used more than once, and when you're playing the stage, that heart is rendered into the game, regardless of whether you can see it or not. So I'll never truly understand why the developers decide to leave it out of the game, but I admit I've had a lot of fun trying to theorize why that is. One last great example is in Super Smash Bros. Brawl, and that is when you take the camera up to Captain Falcon's face, you can actually find that he has an eyeball. Now, there's evidence to show that there was a strong possibility that this was all meant for battle damage, and that claim is aided by the fact that only one of his eyeballs is actually rendered on the model. But for whatever the reason was for them to put this in the game, in the end, they covered it up so that you're not able to see it by traditional means.
These are really only the beginning when it comes to artifacts left in games, but we'd love to hear your thoughts on this topic as well. We honestly only covered a fraction of these hidden treasures in games, and now that we've explained a few, we'd like to hear about your experiences. Have you ever encountered something in a game that a developer left behind? If so, what was it, and how did it change your experience within the game? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. I want to give a huge shout out to Shesez for helping me out with this video. I stumbled upon his channel through Zelda Informer back when he had just broken 1,000 subscribers, and I knew I had stumbled upon something special. Shesez is one of the most honest and genuine YouTubers I have ever met, and that resonated with me from day one. I strongly recommend giving his series Boundary Break a watch, as it is something beyond what you normally encounter in video games. I helped him out with his recent Banjo Kazooie video as well, and it was a pleasure to do so. And with that, thanks for tuning in to this investigative analysis of hidden game relics. If you'd like to join me on my YouTube voyage and continue to uncover the forgotten parts of video games, then the subscribe button is just what you're looking for. Thanks for watching, guys and gals, and until my next video, cheers. You've made it to the end of the video, but wait, your quest isn't over yet. If you enjoyed this video, you will probably enjoy my series on Nintendo 64 mysteries as well. On the right, you'll find my collaboration with Shesez on his channel, on his episode of Banjo Kazooie Boundary Break. As always, there's a slew of other videos on my channel too, so regardless, I hope you enjoy.